He gave away my dream Christmas gift to his daughter and called me childish when I cried. Then I left him stranded. I've been married to my husband for a little over 3 years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. He's terrible at giving gifts. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, even Mother's Day. Year after year, I got nothing. His response? You're not my mother. After our first year together, I decided to stop going out of my way for him. Why bother when the energy isn't reciprocated? Father's Day was the turning point. Normally, I'd cook him a big meal and drive 45 minutes to pick up his daughter so they could spend the day together. But that year, I had plans. When he called to ask when I was bringing her over, I simply said, "You're not my father," and hung up. I left him a letter on the table explaining how hurt I was, and later he promised to try harder. He's been better since then, letting me pick out my gifts and paying for them, which I honestly don't mind. Fast forward to Christmas. A week before the holiday, he surprised me. Breakfast out, coffee in hand, and a trip to the mall to pick out my gift. I couldn't believe it. I'd been saving up for months for my dream designer purse, and there it was, right in front of me. When I explained how much I'd been wanting it, he smiled and said I deserved it. I nearly screamed with excitement and promised I didn't need anything else. When we got home, he asked me to leave the purse in the car so he could put another small gift inside it for me to open on Christmas morning. I was on cloud 9. Finally, I felt seen and appreciated. But then Christmas morning came. We were on our way to his mother's house, and I was half asleep in the passenger seat when I turned around to greet his daughter. That's when I saw it. She was holding my purse. My dream purse. "Where did you get that?" I asked, my voice shaky. Silence. My husband kept his eyes on the road, hands gripping the wheel. His daughter mumbled, "Dad gave it to me." I lost it. "You what?" I screamed, looking at my husband with disbelief. He tried to calm me down, but I wasn't having it. I told his daughter her father had no right to give her my purse, but she refused to hand it back. My heart sank. Tears streamed down my face as I turned to the window, hiding my despair. We pulled into a gas station, and she bolted from the car, taking the purse with her. My husband explained that after he dropped me off that day, she saw the purse, begged him for it, and guilted him into giving it to her. He said he was sorry, but what could he do now? The money was gone. My gift was gone. I couldn't stay in that car another second. While he went into the gas station to give her more money, I slid into the driver's seat, wiped my face, and drove away. I left them both there. I spent Christmas Day with my family, ignoring his calls. The only person I spoke to was his daughter's mother, after she left me a nasty voicemail accusing me of jealousy. I set her straight. That purse wasn't hers. It was mine. A gift stolen because her daughter manipulated my husband. She apologized, but the damage was done. Since then, I've been distant. I don't make him dinner. I don't talk to him. At night, when he reaches for me, I cry silently. It's not anger I feel anymore. Just emptiness. He's back on the road now, and while I miss him, I can't shake the disappointment. I keep replaying that moment in my mind, watching my dream purse in someone else's hands and realizing how easily he let me down. How do I move past this? Or do I? Update 1. The days following Christmas were some of the most emotionally draining of my life. My husband's betrayal with the purse wasn't just about the item itself. It was a slap in the face, a reminder of all the times he put his daughter's wants above anything I needed. The fallout started almost immediately after I left him and his daughter at the gas station, but the real mess unfolded when we both had time to reflect, or in his case, time to deflect. When he finally got home the day after Christmas, his demeanor was a mix of anger and guilt. He walked in without a word and stood in the kitchen, his hands bracing the counter as if he was preparing for a fight. I sat at the table, sipping coffee and refusing to acknowledge him until he finally spoke. He started apologizing in his typical roundabout way, saying he didn't mean to hurt me and that he got caught up in the moment with his daughter. It was like he expected those words to erase what he'd done. I let him talk for a while, but when I finally interrupted, It wasn't to scream or cry. I simply told him that this wasn't about the purse anymore. It was about his pattern of thoughtlessness, his constant enabling of his daughter's behavior, and his complete disregard for how his decisions impact me. His excuse that she's just a kid didn't fly with me. At 16, she knows better than to manipulate her father into giving away someone else's property. The conversation didn't go anywhere productive. He kept saying he'd make it up to me, that he didn't realize how much the purse meant to me. I told him the purse itself wasn't the issue. It was the principle. I spent months saving for that bag, dreaming of owning it, and he just handed it over like it was nothing. He couldn't understand why I felt so betrayed. And honestly, I couldn't decide if he was truly that oblivious or just didn't care enough to try. Then his mother called me, and that was when my anger hit a new level. She had heard his version of events, which conveniently painted him as the doting father who was trying to make up for lost time with his daughter and me as the petty wife who overreacted. She accused me of being childish for leaving them at the gas station and said I needed to grow up and let it go. Her exact words were, "It's just a purse. Not the end of the world." I didn't hold back. I told her the full story, including how her granddaughter manipulated her son into giving away my one Christmas gift, the only thing I had asked for all year. I explained how much that purse symbolized to me, not just as a material item, but as a sign that my husband had finally listened to me and cared enough to put thought into a gift. Her response? Well, maybe you shouldn't put so much value on material things. The conversation ended with me hanging up on her, which I've never done before. I didn't regret it for a second. My sister-in-law, SIL, called me the next day after hearing the story from my husband's brother. She was livid on my behalf and told me she couldn't believe how spoiled and entitled my stepdaughter was acting. SIL has always been vocal about how my husband coddles his daughter, but this situation seemed to shock even her. She and her husband confronted my husband, which led to an explosive argument. My husband accused me of turning his family against him, as if I had any control over their reactions. I reminded him that his actions, not my words, were the problem. If his family was upset with him, maybe he should take a hard look at his behavior instead of blaming me. He didn't like that, and the rest of the night was tense. He slept on the couch without me even asking him to. Then came the Instagram post. His daughter uploaded a picture of herself with the purse captioned, "Dad always comes through, my new favorite bag." The audacity. I showed it to my husband, and his response was predictable. "She's just excited, don't overthink it." Overthink it? She was flaunting the very thing that caused this massive rift in our marriage, and he wanted me to let it slide. The next day, I received a voicemail from her mother. She accused me of being jealous of her daughter and leaving her stranded at the gas station out of spite. That was my breaking point. I called her back and set the record straight, explaining everything in excruciating detail. I told her that her daughter wasn't some victim in this situation. She had manipulated her father into giving away my gift, knowing full well it wasn't hers to take. To her credit, she apologized and said she talked to her daughter, but the damage was already done. At home, things grew colder by the day. I stopped cooking for my husband, serving meals only for myself and my son. I didn't yell or argue. I just disengaged. When he tried to talk to me, I answered in short, clipped sentences. When he tried to touch me, I pulled away. It wasn't out of anger anymore. I just felt empty. The betrayal had sucked the life out of me, and I couldn't bring myself to pretend everything was okay. He left for a long-haul trip shortly after, which gave me some space to think. I realized this wasn't just about the purse or even his daughter. It was about the bigger picture, about how I've been feeling undervalued and unappreciated in this marriage for a long time. The purse incident was just the final straw. I confided in a close friend who's been through a similar situation, and she suggested counseling. I'm considering it, but part of me wonders if there's even anything left to salvage. I don't want to stay in a marriage where I feel like an afterthought, but I also don't want to give up without trying everything. For now, I've decided to take it one day at a time. My son is my priority, and I'm focusing on creating a peaceful, happy home for him. As for my husband, I'm not sure where we stand. He's been texting and calling while on the road, trying to patch things up. but I haven't responded much. I need time to figure out what I want and whether I can even forgive him for this. Update 2. The days turned into weeks, and the distance between my husband and me grew wider. He was back on the road, sending sporadic texts and leaving voicemails that swung between apologetic and frustrated. I messed up, I know, but can we move on? And, "You're really punishing me for a purse?" were the recurring themes. Meanwhile, I was working hard to not spiral into the same repetitive thought cycle. Why did he think it was okay to put me second? Why did he always prioritize his daughter's wants over my needs? Every time I thought I had calmed down, I'd see something that would remind me of that day, and the anger would resurface like a wave crashing out of nowhere. My son noticed the tension too. He asked me one night, "Are you and Dad okay?" It broke me because he doesn't call my husband Dad unless he's really trying to show that he sees him as family. I reassured him that everything would be fine, but I hated lying to him. In reality, I didn't know if things could ever go back to normal. The purse, believe it or not, was still making waves. My stepdaughter was flaunting it all over her social media, tagging her friends in posts about her amazing dad and sharing stories about how much she loved her Christmas surprise. Every post was like a dagger in my chest. I didn't even care about the purse itself anymore. It was the principle, the sheer audacity of her actions, and the total lack of accountability. And my husband? He did nothing to address it. Not one word to her. He acted like ignoring the situation would make it disappear. What really pushed me over the edge was a conversation I overheard between my stepdaughter and my husband. She called while he was still on the road, and I heard her say, "Dad, can you talk to her? She's acting like such a child about the purse. It's not a big deal." I didn't hear his response, but the fact that she felt comfortable saying that to him told me everything I needed to know. She had no remorse, no sense of wrongdoing, and my husband clearly hadn't done anything to make her understand how much she had hurt me. I decided I needed to set some boundaries. When he finally came home after weeks on the road, I told him we needed to talk. He sat down, looking exhausted and defeated, but I wasn't going to let that deter me. I laid it all out. How his constant enabling of his daughter's behavior was driving a wedge between us. How I felt like I was always coming in second to her, and how his decision to give her my Christmas gift was just the latest in a long line of betrayals. His response was predictable. He admitted he had messed up, but insisted that I was making it bigger than it needed to be. "It's just a purse," he said again, as if those words were some magic spell that would make everything okay. I told him it wasn't about the purse. It was about the lack of respect and consideration. I reminded him that I had spent months saving for that bag, that it symbolized something more to me than just a material item. His reply? "I didn't think it would mean that much to you." That's when I realized we weren't just dealing with a lack of respect. We were dealing with a lack of understanding. He didn't see things the way I did because he didn't care to try. He was so used to brushing things under the rug that he didn't know how to deal with actual conflict. I told him I needed space. He didn't take it well, asking where that left us, what it meant for our marriage. I told him I didn't have all the answers yet, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. He tried to argue, but I shut it down. I needed him to understand that this wasn't up for debate. The next few weeks were a blur of silence and awkward cohabitation. I threw myself into work, into parenting, into anything that would keep my mind off the situation. My husband tried to make small gestures, bringing home flowers, cooking dinner, offering to take my son to his soccer practice. But it all felt hollow. He wasn't addressing the real issue, and I couldn't pretend like a bouquet of roses would fix everything. Then came the phone call from my stepdaughter's mother. She wanted to mediate the situation, as if this was some kind of business dispute. I told her I wasn't interested in talking to someone who didn't even know the full story. She insisted she had heard both sides, and I told her that if she truly believed her daughter was in the right, then we had nothing to discuss. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying her daughter was upset and felt like I hated her. I told her the truth. I didn't hate her daughter, but I couldn't respect someone who refused to take accountability for their actions. That conversation left me drained. I realized I wasn't just dealing with my husband and his daughter. I was dealing with an entire family dynamic that enabled this kind of behavior. His mother, his ex, even some of his siblings. They all contributed to this mess in one way or another. And I was tired of being the only one trying to fix it. By the time Valentine's Day rolled around, I had made up my mind. I wasn't ready to end the marriage, but I also wasn't ready to pretend like things were okay. I told my husband we needed therapy, individual and couples. He resisted at first, saying we didn't need someone else in our business, but I told him it wasn't negotiable. If he wanted to save this marriage, he needed to put in the work. He eventually agreed, but I could tell he wasn't thrilled about it. We've had a few sessions now, and while they've been uncomfortable, they've also been eye-opening. The therapist helped me articulate my feelings in a way that I hadn't been able to before, and it forced my husband to confront some hard truths about himself and his relationship with his daughter. As for my stepdaughter, I've kept my distance. I haven't spoken to her since Christmas, and honestly, I don't know when or if that will change. She hasn't apologized or shown any sign of remorse, and I'm not going to chase after her for something she doesn't want to give. The road ahead still feels uncertain, but for the first time in months, I feel like I'm taking steps in the right direction. Whether that leads to reconciliation or something else entirely, I don't know. But at least now I'm prioritizing myself and my son, and that feels like a win in itself.